The introduction to the phenomenon of the dancing shadow sets the stage for our exploration into the peculiar world of a kitten's animated shadow. Here, we define the core concept. The moment a kitten's shadow appears to detach from its physical source and move with an independent, almost sentient rhythm. This isn't merely a trick of light or a misperception. It's the initial, captivating observation that sparks the entire narrative. The significance of this point is paramount as it establishes the central mystery and the driving force behind our story. Without this initial, inexplicable dance, there would be no phenomenon to investigate, no story to tell. It's the inciting incident, the moment the ordinary becomes extraordinary. Consider two examples that illustrate this point. First, imagine a playful kitten batting at a sunbeam on the floor. Suddenly, its shadow, instead of mirroring the kitten's paw, seems to linger for a fraction of a second, then twitch in a direction the kitten isn't moving, as if anticipating its next pounce. A second example could be a kitten napping, curled in a tight ball. As a lamp casts its silhouette, the shadow might subtly shift, stretching and contracting as if breathing independently, even though the kitten itself remains perfectly still. These are the subtle yet undeniable instances that mark the beginning of the phenomenon. While there are no direct opinions in a scientific sense, the initial reactions of awe, confusion, and perhaps a touch of fear from observers would support the idea of something unusual occurring. The challenge, of course, lies in explaining this seemingly impossible event. Skeptics might immediately attribute it to optical illusions, faulty perception, or even pareidolia, the tendency to perceive meaningful patterns in random data. They might argue that the human mind, eager for narrative, is simply interpreting natural light and movement in a fantastical way. However, the consistent, repeated nature of these observations across different lighting conditions and observers begins to chip away at purely rational explanations. This introductory point profoundly influences every subsequent aspect of our topic. It necessitates an investigation into the why and how of the dancing shadow. It leads us to explore potential magical, scientific, or even psychological explanations. The initial observation of the dancing shadow directly informs our search for its origins, its patterns, and its ultimate impact on the kitten and its surroundings. It's the foundation upon which all further theories, experiments, and narrative developments are built. In the narrative of when the kitten's shadow began dancing independently, we encounter a pivotal moment that represents the breakdown between physical reality and supernatural phenomenon. This concept describes the exact instance when an ordinary household pet's shadow defies natural laws by moving separately from its source, marking a transition from the mundane to the inexplicable. The shadow's autonomous movement serves as the catalyst that transforms a simple story about a kitten into an exploration of reality's fragility and the presence of forces beyond our understanding. The significance of this moment cannot be overstated, as it establishes the central conflict and wonder that drives the entire narrative forward. When shadows operate independently, they challenge our fundamental understanding of how the world works, creating both fascination and unease in equal measure. Consider a specific example where the kitten sits perfectly still on a windowsill, yet its shadow performs elaborate movements along the wall, swaying and twirling as though animated by an unseen choreographer. Another illustration might involve the shadow dancing during moments of the kitten's distress, suggesting it possesses not just independence, but perhaps protective or communicative intentions toward its physical counterpart. This phenomenon resonates with ancient folklore across cultures that view shadows as separate entities containing souls or spiritual essence. Some traditions believe shadows can act as guardians or harbingers, lending credence to the idea that the dancing shadow might serve a purpose beyond mere spectacle. However, skeptics might argue this represents hallucination, optical illusion, or even the psychological projection of human desire for magic in an increasingly rational world. Scientific explanations could point to unusual lighting conditions, neurological misfiring, or the observer's own movement creating the illusion of shadow independence. These alternative viewpoints add depth by acknowledging that what we perceive as supernatural might have naturalistic explanations. This dancing shadow connects intimately to broader themes within the story. The relationship between physical and metaphysical existence, questions of consciousness and autonomy, and whether our world contains more mystery than we acknowledge.
The shadow's behavior might foreshadow other reality distortions, influence the kitten's own behavior, or serve as a gateway through which other impossible events emerge. It transforms the kitten from mere pet into a vessel for exploring humanity's eternal fascination with the boundary between possible and impossible. The first moment of independent movement marks that uncanny instant when the kitten's shadow breaks free from its expected behavior, moving in ways that defy natural laws. This phenomenon represents the transition from ordinary reality to something inexplicable, where a shadow that should simply mirror its source begins exhibiting autonomy.
Picture a lazy afternoon when the kitten stretches on the windowsill, but instead of the shadow stretching in perfect synchronization, it twists half a second later or angles in a direction that doesn't match the sunlight's trajectory. This moment holds profound significance because it establishes the boundary between the mundane and the mysterious. It's the point where observers must confront whether they're witnessing optical illusion, experiencing perceptual error, or genuinely encountering something that challenges their understanding of reality. This initial instance of independent movement sets the tone for everything that follows, creating a sense of unease mixed with wonder. Consider two specific manifestations. First, the shadow might begin swaying rhythmically while the kitten sits perfectly still, as if caught by an invisible breeze that only affects the two-dimensional projection. Second, the shadow could take a step forward when the kitten takes a step backward, creating an unsettling mirror reversal that suggests intentionality rather than mere physical anomaly. Skeptics would naturally argue that such observations stem from misperception, fatigue, or environmental factors like multiple light sources creating confusing overlapping shadows. Some might suggest psychological explanations, perhaps stress-induced hallucinations, or the brain's pattern recognition systems misfiring. These alternative viewpoints deserve consideration, as extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. This pivotal moment connects deeply to subsequent developments in the phenomenon. The initial independent movement serves as a gateway event. Once the shadow demonstrates autonomy, it often escalates to more complex behaviors like dancing, forming shapes, or even interacting with other shadows. It also affects the human-kitten relationship, introducing an element of uncertainty about the pet's true nature. Furthermore, this moment raises questions about whether the shadow has always possessed consciousness that only now manifests visibly, or whether something external triggered this awakening. The implications ripple outward, forcing witnesses to reconsider their assumptions about the nature of light, physics, and the hidden dimensions that might exist alongside our perceived reality. The moment when a kitten's shadow begins moving independently represents a pivotal supernatural threshold where the ordinary rules of reality break down, signaling a shift from mundane existence into the realm of the impossible. This phenomenon serves as a gateway event, the first undeniable proof that something fundamentally wrong has occurred in the natural order. Unlike subtle strangeness that might be dismissed as imagination or trick of light, a shadow moving contrary to its source creates an unavoidable confrontation with the inexplicable. This point holds critical significance because it establishes the story's departure from reality while grounding the fantastic in something deeply familiar.
Shadows are universal, constant companions that obey absolute physical laws. When these laws shatter, the violation feels visceral and unsettling in ways that flying objects or strange noises cannot match. The shadow becomes an antagonist born from the kitten itself, creating internal conflict and duality. Consider a kitten playing in afternoon sunlight when suddenly its shadow continues pouncing while the actual kitten sits still, watching its dark counterpart with tilted head and dilated pupils. Or imagine the shadow stretching across a wall, forming shapes the kitten's body never makes. Wings, elongated limbs, or even humanoid gestures. These manifestations suggest the shadow possesses awareness and intention separate from its physical source. From a storytelling perspective, some might argue this concept works better as metaphor than literal event, representing the kitten's emerging independence or hidden nature. Others insist the supernatural interpretation creates more compelling narrative tension and wonder. There's debate about whether the shadow acts malevolently or simply explores newfound autonomy, much like the kitten itself learning about the world. This dancing shadow inevitably influences everything that follows. It raises questions about whether other shadows might rebel, whether the kitten controls this ability, and what caused this breach between physical form and dark reflection. The phenomenon could spread, affecting other objects and creatures, or remain isolated to this single kitten.
It establishes rules for the supernatural elements while simultaneously suggesting those rules remain dangerously fluid. Most importantly, it transforms an innocent kitten into something simultaneously adorable and unsettling, forcing observers to reconsider what they thought they understood about the boundary between light and dark, substance and reflection, reality and impossibility.